years ago, I started checking something off my bucket list that had honestly been there longer than some of you, like freshmen, have been alive. I started training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, okay? No, don't applaud. Here's the thing. I know a lot of you don't have a context for that, and you've done like karate and taekwondo and stuff. And so Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I like to describe it as like really aggressive cuddling, okay? There's no hitting, there's no strikes, no knees, no punches. Literally, we go to the gym and we learn, and we literally drill and fight every night, 2-3 times, we fight. We go to the gym and we learn how to take someone down. We learn how to advance position. We learn how to basically sub them to submission, basically through like chokes and arm locks. We basically learn how to block blood and airflow from each other's brains until our partner taps or submits or passes out. And we learn to contort each other's bodies in such painful ways until our partner taps or something snaps. And it's such a lovely sport. I love it so much. Jesus loves it. So in the beginning, it was 2020, 4 years ago. I was like 2 weeks in to starting this jiu-jitsu journey. And I went to like my 4th or 5th class, okay? I'm brand new, I'm super nervous, I'm super scared, I'm claustrophobic, right? And I show up and I get partnered up just randomly with this high school kid named Jackson, okay? You need to know what Jackson looks like. Jackson is like 6'20", and he weighs like 83 pounds, okay? Yeah, you know the type. Like they turn sideways and they just disappear, right? And then he had like chubby geriatric me, and I was like 20 pounds heavier, way out of shape. And we were learning together, each other, leg triangles. Okay, now I thought about bringing somebody up and like doing it on stage, but you don't need to hear me breathing that hard, and I might like gravity and me might hurt somebody's leg. So this is a leg triangle, okay? Believe it or not, the person on the bottom is in control. And what they're doing is they're using their leg over the shoulder to block the carotid artery on one side, the blood flow on one side, and they're using their opponent's arm with pressure from their leg to block the artery on the other side, and to finish, you kind of squeeze and pull their head down, man, it's really effective. If you're really good at it, which I'm not, because I have like stumpy bridge troll legs and I'm not bendy, but if you're good at it, like you can make someone submit or pass out within literally like a couple seconds. It's really, really effective, right? And so we're learning this. Our instructor, Bebeto, he's like teaching us and telling us the steps, and so Jackson does it to me until I tap, and I do it to him until he taps. We just go back and forth. You feel me? It was my turn. It was like 3rd or 4th time, right? And so I'm going through the steps. Okay, so I'm going to break my guard, and I'm going to switch my hips and break his grip and put my foot on the hip and switch my hips again and throw my leg up over and lock my ankles and grab. And I was at the point where I'm about to finish this submission, and what you do is you elevate your hips to move their arm over. And as I was elevating my hips and beginning to lock it in and squeeze, I had a moment, okay? Now, to understand this moment, I need you to look at this picture and notice the proximity of the person on the bottom, me, their booty to the person on top's neck, okay? And so the moment I had was what I would call a lack of sphincter control, okay? And so I tooted. Now, here's the deal. Toot is like way too cute and sweet of a word to describe what my body did in violation of this child's throat, because it was like an airy foghorn. If you've ever heard like in a movie like a cruise ship leave, it was just like 2 seconds of just like, and so I elevate my hips, I'm moving his arm over, and I start to pull his head down, and it was like, and bro, I'll never forget, his head's like being pulled down, and I let go as the 2-second toot raged his throat canal, and his eyes got really big, and I dropped my legs, and he looked at me, and he said, I swear to you, and I quote, he goes, I felt that in my throat. And in that moment, dude, you gotta understand, I have no shame, I have no pride. I'm telling like 800 people right now about how I like rattled this kid's soul with my flatulence. Like, I am not embarrassed by anything, but in that moment, because I was new and I was nervous and I was scared and I didn't want people to think I was weird and I was crazy, dude, in that moment, when I had wronged this poor 16-year-old child, I wanted to run as far away as I could and put as much distance between him and I as possible. I was ashamed. He probably never wanted to see me again, right? And that response right there of when I wronged this poor child, that response of wanting to run and put distance and not see them again, that is what we do when we wrong other humans. And I don't mean wrong them with a toot. I mean like really wrong them. Like we fracture our friendship with them. We hurt them with our gossip, our slander. We bully them and pick on them to elevate ourselves. Like when we really wrong another human in this life and we really know that we're in the wrong, we respond the same way I wanted to respond to Jackson, which is we don't want to see him. We want to put distance between us and them. We want to run the other direction. We don't ever want to run into them again. We start avoiding the places that they are, right? And the whole time, we're thinking that they're so mad at us and they're so disappointed. And here's the big one, is we think they probably never want anything to do with us again. Jackson probably didn't. But here's the problem. That response is also at a much deeper level is literally exactly what we do with God when we wrong him. When we sin, when we mess up, when we stumble, we fall in it, when we struggle, right? When we get caught up in addiction, the substances we can't stop putting in us, or the things that we can't stop looking at, can't stop looking at, when we're in that relationship romantically that we just want to belong to this person so much, to be loved, that it leads us to maybe cross boundaries and lines that God doesn't want for us, when we're friendship with a circle that we want to belong to because we think they elevate us, and yet in order for us to belong with them, we have to do and say things that we know dishonor the Lord. And I could go on and on with all the different ways that even in this room right now are represented, because I know you, because I work with you, that when we get in it and we mess up and we're struggling and we're battling and we feel like we've really disappointed God, what do? We run. Well, first thing we do is we pick up our shame shovel, right? And we just start heaping shame and guilt, thinking that God must be so mad and he must hate us and he must be so disappointed. And we put distance between us and him. We don't show up at youth group in church anymore. We don't want to be in God's presence or in his word or with his people, right? Because we'll just feel more conviction and more guilt. And so we put distance between us and him and his presence and his word and his people. And the entire time, and this is the big one that really applies tonight, the entire time when we feel like we're fracturing our relationship with God and we are running and we are heaping shame, we think to ourselves, there is no way that he's going to want anything to do with me ever again until I figure this out because of what I've done. And here's what you're going to learn tonight. What you're going to learn tonight, first and foremost, is your sin and your struggle that right now is causing you to squirm. The Holy Spirit's like, "Ooh, that's you, bro. That's you, sis." That whatever that sin is, whatever that struggle is, whatever that temptation is for you, right, that you just can't overcome, right? And whatever it may be, you're going to find tonight, like, he knew about it before you ever conceived it. He knew about your failure and your struggle and your sin and your darkness and your humanity before you ever even conceived it. And you know what? He died for it anyway. In the midst of your failure and struggle, he died for you anyway. And what he wants for you tonight is to recognize that at the breakfast table tonight, there's an offering and there's an invitation. And the offering tonight is to put down your shame shovel and stop running and stop putting distance between yourself and God and pretending like you've got it all figured out and hiding your struggles from the people in your row, your group right now. He's offering you rest from the shame shovel and the running, rest in his love, confidently. And the invitation is that if you can embrace that, he's got a purpose for you. He's got a kingdom purpose for you. He wants you to feed his sheep. And that is exactly what you see in the life of this guy that we're gonna dive into in John 21. His name is Simon Peter, but the problem is you need to know that like what we're going to dig into tonight is like part 3 of his story. And in order to understand John 21 part 3, we've got to do a helicopter flyover of part 2 in John 18. And we got to start in part 1 in John 13. Sorry, camera people, already I apologize. Please forgive me. But we got a helicopter flyover for you to get it. Okay, so let's jump over here in John 13, part 1 of Simon Peter's story. But here's what we got to do. We got to do full stop. Time out, bad guys. Who's Simon Peter? Here's what I know. I didn't grow up in church. And I know there's a bunch of unchurched kids in here like, Simon Peter who? Noah who? Martha who? Like, we don't know, right? So here's the deal. A little bit of background. He is one of Jesus' 12 disciples, one of his closest followers. But even more than that, he's kind of in the circle within a circle. He is like one of Jesus' 2 closest boys. Like him and John and James sometimes, like, dude, they get to see Jesus do things and be a part of things that a lot of the other disciples don't get to, right? He's one of Jesus' 2, maybe 3 best friends, right? And here's what else you need to know about him. He's like me, he's a kid idiot, okay? He's a knucklehead. He is like the most ADHD-ridden freshman boy in all of Scripture. And I love him for it because I can get it, right? Like he acts without thinking. He speaks without thinking to the point he gets his foot so far down his throat he can lick his knee. Like he just finds himself in these like tough circumstances, kind of getting called to the carpet because he's just brash, right? He just acts without thinking, and I love him, right? So, okay, over here in part 1, in John 13, here's what we find. Jesus' ministry is coming to a close. 3+ years. He's about to go to the garden and be arrested. He's about to go to the cross, right? And he's sharing this final supper with his boys in the room of this house they borrowed. It's called Passover. It's like a holy Jewish feast, right? And it's just him and the 12 up there, and they're sharing this meal. And Jesus, in this moment, predicts to them, hey, I'm going to have to leave, okay? I'm going to have to go away. And where I'm going, you can't come, right? And when he says this, Simon Peter's like, where are you going that we can't come? I don't understand. I don't get this. Like, well. And Jesus is like, hey, listen, where I'm going, you can't come. And Simon Peter in this moment, remember, brash freshman boy, right? He kind of rebukes Jesus. Like, Lord, where are you going that we can't go? I will lay down my life for you. And in that moment, Jesus says, Simon Peter, lay down your life for me. In fact, before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you're going to deny that you knew me 3 times. 3 times. Now, why did Jesus do this? I don't think he's like, I'm going to say the biggest I told you so in all of Scripture ever. Like, I don't think that's why he's doing this, right? I think he's telling Simon Peter, hey, your sin and failure, it's going to be the biggest failure of your life, and you're going to just feel awful about yourself. And I'm telling you right now, I know about it. And I'm not scared, and I'm still sharing this meal with you. Like, it's okay. I'm not scared of it, right? So he predicts his failure in part 1. You jump over here to part 2, and here's what happened. They leave that upper room. They finish their meal. They go to the garden. They're praying, and some people come to arrest Jesus because they're going to run him through some trials. And what's funny is in the garden, remember, he's the brash freshman boy. Like, they're arresting Jesus, and Peter's like, no. And so he yanks a sword off of one of the soldiers and tries to literally chop a dude's head off and only hits his ear. That's a little weird in light of current circumstances, but I digress. And Jesus, after the dude's ear, his name is Malchus. Like, Peter's like, no, and Malchus is like, whoa, and Jesus is like, whoa, and fixes it with his God powers, right? And they arrest Jesus, and they haul him off, and he goes through a series of trials here in part 2, where the Jews want to kill him, but they don't have the authority, and the Romans don't want to be the ones to pull the trigger, and so they just kind of pass him back and forth, right? Here's the thing. John, the other like BFF forever of Jesus with Peter, John knows the high priest, and so he's allowed to come into these trials. Well, he's trying to get Peter access, and so Peter's like waiting outside the courtyard, right, on John to get him access. While he's chilling out there, a slave girl comes up to him, John 18, part 2, and is like, hey, aren't you one of his followers? And he's like, no, I'm not. John gets him access. He goes into the courtyard. They've got a fire there because it's cold in the desert at night, and they're all chilling around the fire, and while they're standing there, a man there recognizes Peter and is like, hey, aren't you one of his followers? No, I'm not. I don't know the man. And then the third time, it's actually a relative of the dude Malchus that he tried to chop his head off and only mangled his ear, right? It's his relative, Scripture says, looks at Peter and goes, didn't I see you in the garden? Aren't you one of his followers too? And Peter is like, no, I'm not. I don't know the man. Scripture, the other Gospels kind of give us more words. They're like, he's calling down curses on himself. Like, I swear I don't know him, right? And when he makes this third denial in part 2 here, a couple things happen, right? Yeah, a rooster crows. But other than that, Luke tells us that wherever Jesus is, he's within eyesight but out of earshot. And he's being tried, and that when Simon Peter makes his third denial, Jesus locks eyes with him, Luke says. Like, stares him down. And I don't think he's like your mom, your dad when you fail on the football field. I think he's looking at him like, hey, I told you about this. I predicted this. I'm not scared of this. Remember, right? The other thing that happens is when he and Jesus lock eyes and the rooster is crowing and sunrise is coming, Peter runs away, and it says he weeps bitterly. And when I say he runs away, you need to understand, homie like went Forrest Gump and like kept running. Like he disappears, right? Jesus' most dire moment, he's being slapped and interrogated and spit on. He goes to be beaten within an inch of his life. He goes to the cross. Peter never shows up for any of this. One of Jesus' 2 closest homies, MIA for all of this because he ran, right? John shows up at the crucifixion, not Peter. What did Peter do? He flees, weeping, and he goes back to his old life of fishing. And isn't that what we do when we fail God, we often want to run back to what's familiar, the old people, the old sins, the old habits. So he goes back to fishing. Now here's the crazy thing. A lot of you right now are sitting here going, dude, he just lied. Like, I've lied to my youth minister 37 times this week, all right? And I know some of you hood rats have been lying to your youth ministers, right, and lying to each other, but you need to understand that, like, he did something way more extreme than lying, okay? Like, he, in his mind, has completely fractured his relationship with Jesus. And let me flesh this out for you. I know that we talked up here earlier with Tyler that I am married, and I know that some of you were like, shut up, no way. But, like, really, there is someone who loves me, okay? And she, again, best friend, love this woman, so loyal, so faithful, and just like ball of anxiety and can't make a decision, and I love it. I'm here for it. And we've been married 20 years. I want you to pretend that my wife Kelsey and I go to a social gathering, okay? Now, we know we're pretending because we're introverts and we would never choose that, but we go to a social gathering, right? And she's over there by the charcuterie board hanging out with some people, and I'm over here, okay, talking to a crew of people, and we're within eyesight but out of earshot. We can't hear the conversation, but we can see each other. And I'm just talking to some people, and let's pretend, again, pretending, this beautiful woman comes up and is like talking to my group, and we're engaging, and she starts like flirting with me. Again, pretending, because beautiful women normally are like, oh, you know, like, oh. But she's flirting, and she's laying it down, and I'm like picking it up, and we're back and forth, and I'm slipping my ring off, and I'm like Harry Potter, the boy who rizzed, you know what I'm saying? And like, dude, we're engaging, right? And let's say in this conversation, someone who knows me goes, Tibbit, what are you doing? You can't flirt with her. You're married. Your wife is right over there. What is Kelsey going to think? And in this moment, I go, I'm not married. I don't even know that girl. What are you talking about? And we start talking again, and we interact, and I'm like, Risley Bear, right? And so we're just talking. And then somebody else comes and is like, bro, what are you doing? Tibbit, you're married. Your wife is literally right over there eating cheese and weird meat. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I don't even know that girl. What are you talking about? If I deny in this moment knowing my wife, like, you got to understand, I'm pretending as if the vows we made on December 13, 2003 were lies. And I didn't mean it. I'm pretending as if 20 years of marriage, none of it happened. I'm pretending as if the life that we built, our two children, the community and church we love and we serve in, right? That I'm pretending as if none of that happened and none of it meant anything. I'm willing to pretend as if none of that ever existed. She's unknown to me. Why? For a moment of flirtation, a potential rendezvous? When I face my wife later on, some of you married couples in here are like, oh, yeah. When I face my wife later on, it's not going to be like, hey, I kind of lied. I'm sorry, you know? Like, bro, I'll be lucky if she doesn't shank me in my sleep, prison style, okay? Because she is that person, okay? Now jump back to Peter. He has, just to save his skin, from 3 beta characters, we don't even know their names, he has, just to save his skin, pretended as if 3 years of ministry, doing life with Jesus daily, face to face, didn't happen. He's pretending as if all the teachings of the new kingdom and loving people, that he didn't hear any of it. He's pretending as if the miracles he saw, the lame walking, the blind receiving their sight, the demons being cast out, Jesus being glorified on the mount, Lazarus and the little girl being resurrected from the dead. He is pretending as if none of that happened in this moment just to save his skin. And so in his mind, he runs away and weeps bitterly. He puts as much distance as he can between himself and Jesus because he thinks he has completely fractured and wrecked his relationship with his Savior and his rabbi that he follows, right? And so where do we find him over here in part 3? So part 3, over here, I think this is part 3. This may be 1, but just work with me, okay? So where do we find him in part 3 in John 21? He's fishing. Remember, he's gone back to his old life. He's like, I don't think Jesus wants anything to do with me. There's no place for me in his kingdom because of how hard I've fallen, how big I've failed. And he goes back to fishing, and he's in a boat. He's fishing all night long, and they ain't caught jack, right? And the sun's up, and they see this stranger on the shore. It's morning, and the stranger's about 100 yards away. And they're like, friends, have you caught anything? And they're like, man, we ain't caught nothing, you know. And well, cast your nets on the other side of the boat. And I literally can see the eye roll, like when your mom and dad give you like the most obvious solution to your problems. You're like, oh my gosh, you don't get me, right? And so like, cast your nets on the other side of the boat. And so they throw their nets on the other side. They haven't caught anything all night. 153 fish, Luke says. They can't even get the nets in the boats. They're near bursting. And in this moment, there's a few other disciples on the boat. They kind of look at each other and have this realization where like, this is some Jesus stuff. You know, he's always like, like doing his God powers and like defying physics and walking on water and making us catch 153 fish. And they realize like it's Jesus, it's the Lord. And Peter does, again, the most brash freshman boy thing ever, okay, ADHD. He's taken his clothes off, essentially, his outer garment. He's probably in his undergarment. It's like a wrap, maybe a tunic, maybe shirtless, right? And he's been fishing all night. And he's about to jump in the water and swim to shore. But what does he do? Better put my clothes on first. So he puts his clothes. That's like one of you kid idiots being like, better put my Birks and my Nike socks on before I jump in and start treading water. Like, that makes no sense. But that's why I love this guy, right? So he jumps in, he swims to shore, and when he gets to shore, Jesus has made a fire. And they sit down and they begin cooking some of the fish that they caught, right? And then Jesus and Peter, after breakfast, they have this conversation. You follow along. It's going to be on the screen. It's John 21, verse 15. And it goes like this. It says, when they finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, stop. Okay, what name does he call him? Not Simon Peter, not Peter. He calls him, okay, put that in your pockets. We're going to get that out later, okay? Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? What are the these? Some people think, hey, Simon, do you love me more than these other disciples? Here's what I think. I think he's saying, Simon, do you love me more than these fish? Like, I thought what we had, Simon, was greater than this old life. I called you to make you fishers of men, and you failed, and you ran right back to your old life. Don't you love me more than these nets and these boats and this fish, right? Yes, Lord, Peter said, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs. I love the Greek for that lamb because it's like a baby sheep, right? Oh, okay. And then again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John. What did he call him? What name? Simon. Do you love me? And he answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And it says Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. And then he predicts the rest of this conversation as he predicts that Peter's going to be martyred and killed for his faith. But his final two words to Peter, and you got to put this in your other pocket. His final two words to Peter concerning his utter failure are just not do better, not get on my level. He says, follow me. File that away. So here's the deal. They have this conversation, and if I don't say this to you, your youth ministers are going to go back to youth group time and be like, listen, he didn't say anything about the Greek words, and so I'm upset. And I just want to save you from that, okay? A little Bible college, like just avoid that, okay? Here's the way it goes. When you read this in English, it's kind of like black and white because there's some stuff going on in the Greek that if you look into the original language, it kind of becomes color, okay? Because in this conversation, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Do you love me? Yes. They're not using the same words for love. They're using synonyms. In our language, I'm like, I love Taco Bell. I don't because it destroys my digestive system. Ooh, okay, but I love Taco Bell, and I love Bo Honey, and I love the Oklahoma Sooners, and I love my wife. And we use one word for all these things that we love, but in Greek, they had different words to express love for different things. And the two words that they're using in this story are agape love, which is like bottomless, unending, selfless, godlike love. And the other one is philos love. It's like a brotherly, chosen, familial relationship kind of love, right? And here's the way it goes. The first two times, Jesus says, Simon, son of John, do you agape me? Do you unendingly, bottomlessly, selflessly love me like your Father loves you? And both of the first times, Simon Peter responds, yes, Lord, you know that I philos you. And then the third time, Jesus switches, says, Simon Peter, do you philos me? Do you phileo me? Well, yes, Lord, you know that I phileo you, right? And he was hurt. Now, here's the deal. There may be something going on there with that. I'm going to be real with you. I'm not a Bible college scholar. I'm not a Bible college professor. I like poop stories. I'm just a youth minister, okay? And so I'm not even going to speak to this because here's the deal. I don't even think it's the most important thing. I think the most important thing of this reinstatement of Peter, and I need you to hear this, is not the words and the synonyms they use. And I'm quoting my rabbi, M. Moore, who's taught me more about the life of Jesus through the pages of his commentaries than anyone in this life. I think the significance is not the words. It's that he asked him 3 times, do you love me? And he said to him 3 times when Peter responded, yes. He said, feed my sheep. Do you love me? Yes, Lord, feed my sheep. Do you love me? Yes, Lord. Take care of my little lambs. Do you love me? Yes, Lord, feed my sheep. Now, why is that significant? I don't think that he's asking Peter 3 times, do you love me? I don't think he's like rubbing his nose in it. Do you love me? Mm-hmm. Do you remember? Is this any significance? He's not like rubbing his nose in his filth. He's not like my mom, like, kind of a thing. Like, I don't think that's the tone of this. I think what Jesus is doing is he's going, Peter, what I need you to understand is that I told you that you were going to fail. I predicted it, not to rub your nose in it, not to shame you and guilt you, but to say to you, I'm not scared of your failure. And what you need to know is that I have a calling and a purpose on your life that is equal, and it's greater than your failure. And so, yeah, did you deny me and fail me 3 times? I knew it was going to happen, and I died and resurrected for you anyway. And what I need you to hear right now is not me remind you of your failure and rub your nose in it. What I need you to hear is, dude, I got a purpose for you. And if you'll rest in my love, I got a calling for you. I want you to feed my sheep, feed my sheep, feed my sheep. And you want to know what tells me that that's the tone of this conversation? That he's not rubbing his nose in it. He's not shaming him. Remember, what name did he call him? Simon. Let me give you like a 4-hour word study, okay, that I did a couple months ago as I was prepping for this, something I didn't know. The Gospels and Jesus never calls Simon Peter by his birth name Simon. It's very rare, okay? A couple hundred times they call him Simon Peter, they call him Peter, but they very rarely ever call him by his birth name, right? It's like 5 times. And the first time is actually when he's called to follow Jesus and be a fisher of men. He doesn't even have his new name Peter yet, okay? And so Jesus is like, Simon, I'm going to make you a fisher of men. Come follow me, right? Leave these nets, right? He uses his birth name. The other time that Jesus used birth name is another high moment, his calling. And it's when Peter makes this declaration of Jesus' identity. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And in this moment, Jesus is like, Simon, like this wasn't revealed to you by men, but by my Father in heaven. I'm telling you that this confession you made is a Petros. It's a rock. And on your confession, I'm going to build my church. And you know what, Simon? This confession you made is so huge that I'm changing your name. You're no longer going to be called Simon. I'm going to change your name to Peter, Petros, rock. And so there's 2 times where Jesus uses Simon's birth name to call him in a high moment where he gets it out. Do you know what the other 3 are? It's when he's biffed it. It's when he's failed. He uses his birth name in the highs and the lows like a parent. And not like my mom, like Matthew Dale, but like a parent who's like getting on his knee and is like, Simon, son of John, like I told you that you were going to fail because I'm not scared of it. And I need you to quit running and quit heaping shame upon yourself with your shame shovel and thinking that I'm so mad at you and thinking that I have no place for you in my kingdom. I need you to stop all that. Stop with the distance. Simon, hear me. My purpose and calling for you is equal and greater to your failure. And I need you to rest in my love, right? So here's the deal. I'm standing up here in a room full of Simons. I'm standing up here on a stage that I don't deserve, preaching a sermon that it took me about 22 years of following Jesus to get. But I know that I stand in a room full of a whole bunch of Simons out here. And here's how I know. I work with you. I'm a youth minister. I literally took my high schoolers to this event a couple weeks ago in Tennessee. Like, we did this whole thing. Like, I do life with you, right? And here's the thing that I know. I know my students, and if you're like my students, here's what I know. So many of you right now are sitting here just squirming. And all week long, maybe you've kind of had your arms crossed during worship and you're not engaging, right? And you're not really engaging in small group and discussion. And it's because you're kind of giving God the Heisman, right? Why? Because you're caught up in it. You've sinned and you've failed. And you got your shame shovel and you're clinging hard to it all week long. And you're thinking, man, if anyone around me knew what I did with that girl that I was dating, like they would literally kick me out. If anybody here knew the addiction that I struggle with and the stuff that I just can't stop looking at, they would never look at me the same. If anybody knew the things that I've said and done to be a part of that social scene that I think elevates me, like, dude, they would just be so ashamed of me, right? And you're sitting there in your seat squirming with your struggle and your addiction and your failure, right? And you're thinking to yourself, God must be so mad and ashamed. And you put all this distance between you and him? I mean, some of you, I'm being real, like, I'm a youth minister. I know how it works. School year starts, and you come to this, and you're like, rah, rah, Jesus, and you're all about it, right? And then school starts, and you start getting with the old friends and the old people and caught up in the old ways, and next thing you know, you disappear. And if you don't disappear, some of you stick around and you fake it. On the outside, you look like me and God, right? But on the inside, you don't pray, you don't talk, you're not in the Word. You think he's so mad and ashamed of you. And I know that in this room, and what's funny, students, is the adults think I'm just talking to you, but I'm really talking to all of you because I know you adults are hood rats too. But like I'm just saying, this room right here is straight up full of a whole bunch of Simon Peters. And here's what you got to understand tonight. You ready? Is that you sit at the breakfast table at that campfire across from Jesus. And the topic at hand at this breakfast table is your absolute, utter failure. And what you need to know, first of all, is he's giving you an offering and an invitation. And this offering is to rest in his love. I said it before, I'll say it again. He's calling you, offering to you, stop running. Stop with the shame shovel. Put that thing down. Stop beating yourself up and saying that God must be so mad and putting all that distance between you and him and his people and his word and his presence and all that stuff. He's offering you rest in his love. And what you need to do tonight, if you're going to embrace that rest in his love, it may be like the 5,000th time, and that's okay. That's the Christian life. Like, I don't even know this. Like, we don't ever figure it out. Like, I'm an old chubby youth minister. Let me tell you, you don't ever just figure it out and arrive and be like, I don't sin anymore. It's not how it works. You like overcome one area in your life, and the next second you realize 15 more. You don't ever figure it out. Do you know what the Christian life is? You fail, you get up, you rest in his love, and you try to do better the next day. And you fail, and you get up and you rest in his love and you try to do better the next day. And so some of you in here need to embrace this rest in his love. And that may look like a conversation with a youth minister, an adult leader, or a couple friends, but you need to rest in his love for the 5,000th time. And some of you need to rest in his love for the first time. And oh man, if I could talk to you one-on-one, I would tell you that I was that high school kid that sat over here in the bleachers in Gunnison, Colorado at CIY Summer Conference in 1997 and heard this message for the first time. Heard the gospel and accepted Christ. And I would just tell you, like, do not hesitate to embrace this rest in his love for the first time. Because here's what he's offering to you. There's nothing you could ever do that's so bad that it would affect his love for you in any way, shape, or form. And there's nothing you could ever do that's so good that would make him love you more. His love for you is not affected by your level of morality. It's not. It is perfect, unending, unchanging love. And tonight he's saying, bro, come rest in this. Sis, come embrace this. Stop running from me. Stop shaming yourself. Stop with the distance. The offering I have at the breakfast table this morning is to rest in my love. And here's the thing. He has an invitation too. But if you don't get the offering, you'll miss this. You'll think that the invitation to purpose is something you do to earn his love. So you've got to get the offering. But here's the invitation. The invitation is purpose and kingdom work and calling. The invitation is to feed his sheep. And here's the thing. I want to apologize to you students here for a second. You ready? As a church, like a Big C church, we don't always like flesh this out for you very well. Like a lot of times we're like, man, he's got purpose and kingdom work. He wants you to feed his sheep. And what do? We show you the big stories. What do we showcase in the videos and on stage and put a spotlight on and talk about up front at our churches and our youth groups? It's the big things. Like, look at these kids. They raised $1 bajillion and bought underwear for all of Asia. Like, or look at these kids. They planted a church under a lake in Argentina with fish. Like we just tell you these grand, huge stories, and you sit there and you think, man, he's inviting me to be a part of his kingdom and to serve him, this kingdom work and this purpose and this calling, but there's no way I could ever do that. And here's the thing. He didn't sit down with Peter at the breakfast table and offer an invitation and say, you're going to be one of the 2 biggest leaders in all of my church. You're going to usher in the Gentiles to this new thing that God's doing. You're going to do big things and be famous forever. And some chubby bald guy is going to say that you were a freshman boy. And like that's not what he said. What did he say? Pull that other thing out. In the conversation, how did he end it? Dude, I just need you to follow me. I don't need you to plant a church under a lake or raise $1 bajillion for underwear or mattresses or whatever. Like, Peter, I just need you to follow me. That's the invitation. Feed my sheep. Do what I do. Take care of the little lambs that I've put in your pasture, students, in the same way that I have taken care of you. And I know some of you are sitting here like, I've never even seen a sheep in real life. Like, what does it look like to take care of them? And you may think complete ignorance, like there's no way that I can take this. And I don't have time to jump in and talk about what it's like to run cows and how you gain trust with them. But here's what I will say. You know what he's inviting you to. You know this invitation at the breakfast table. You know how you know? Because he's just saying, do what I've done to you. Follow me. And he's saying to you, I want you to be a good shepherd or a good shepherdess, ladies, to the sheep that I put in your life. And so not only do you know because you've seen him do it for you, but you know how else I know you know? Because all week long you have been studying and memorizing and reciting in this room the Good Shepherd's Guidebook. All week long you've been reciting and quoting in this room and studying your small group times and your combos and Selah time. You've been digging into Psalm 23, which is like literally the manual for how to be a good shepherd. And so the invitation is this: the Lord is my shepherd, and I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He replenishes my soul. And even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for he is with me. And we don't have time to keep going, but I'm just saying to you, you've quoted and you've recited the things that the Good Shepherd has done in your life, and he's saying to you, follow me. I want you to be a good shepherd like this in the sheep that are in the pasture of your life that I've given you. And so here's what I would say to you. Can you just make sure that the people in your life, that when they have a need, that you try to meet it? And that may be like, hey man, that kid hadn't had a coat all winter long. I'm going to give them one of mine. I'm going to raise some money and get them a jacket. And maybe, man, the first couple weeks of school, that girl sat over there by herself at lunch every day with her earbuds in, and nobody hangs out with her. It may be that on the cheer team, this one girl can't get that stunt, and instead of just letting her fail because it makes you look better, you meet with her after practice to help her figure it out. It may be that in the classroom, someone struggles academically, instead of just like ignoring it and walking on because you're busy and you got better things to do because it's all about you, right? Is that you help them, you offer them, and I could go on and on. Can you just make sure that the needs of the sheep in the field of your life are met, great or small? Can you be green pastures and still waters? Let me be real as a youth minister. Culture in the world that your generation is growing up in is the driest desert, devoid of nourishment and water that any generation has ever existed in. You are the most depressed and anxious, struggling, traumatized, broken generation to ever walk the face of this planet. And I do not have time to go into the nightmare rectangle that you guys carry around in your pocket everywhere and how it's affecting you. I don't have time to soapbox, but you're the most broken generation to ever walk this face of the planet. And it's because this culture just sucks the life out of you. I mean, it just sucks you dry of life and existence. It makes you feel like you'll never fit in, you're never good enough, you're getting left out. It makes you feel like you'll never belong, that you're not athletic enough, you're not beautiful enough. It makes you feel like your image is never going to be good enough, right? And I could go on and on, all the ways that you guys are aware how you're not good enough and you're not being included and you're being left out. This world for you and your peers is a dry, dry desert. And what Jesus is saying is, can you do what I do? Can you show them where nourishment and grass and water is? Can you be a safe person for them in this life and be green grass and water? Can you invite them to youth group and church and show them where they can find nourishment for their soul? Can you be green grass? Can you be encouragement and friend and a presence? And oh man, you're the most traumatized generation to walk the face of this planet. Every person sitting in your row, they're either going through a dark valley or one day they will go through a dark valley. Or they've been through a dark valley and they're still struggling with it. It's gonna affect them till the day they die. I mean, the sexual abuse numbers are just off the charts for your generation. And it makes me want to hurt people. Like the trauma and divorce and the stuff that you deal with in your home lives is just insane. And I'm just telling you this to open your eyes and go, everyone you walk past in the hallway, everyone you sit next to in the dugout, everyone you see in your community, in your neighborhood, and at your youth group, dude, they've got a dark valley somewhere. And Jesus isn't saying, I need you to fix it, I need you to figure it out. He's just saying, can you be with them like I've been with you? Can you sit with them and show empathy and sympathy in the midst of the darkest time of their life? Can you be love and encouragement? But here's the deal, students, you ready? I'm going to say this, and so many of you aren't going to take the invitation off the table. So many of you are going to go back to your lives and continue to believe the lies of the enemy that your culture has told you, and some of your parents have told you. The lie that this life is about you, because it's super flippin' not. You guys are growing up in a time where your parents and your culture is like, oh, it's all about your academic performance and it's all about your athletic glory. If I had $1 for every one of my time that I've seen one of my students just give their whole lives to a sport and then graduate and not even know who they are, I'd have a lot of dollars. Because your culture and some of your parents have led you to believe that your life is about your athletic glory and prowess and your academic level and your social status. And this life is about the American dream, and this life is about your entertainment and things that you like and that make you enjoyable. And you're going to literally miss all the sheep in your pasture that he's inviting you to love like he's loved you and shepherd like he shepherded you. You're going to miss all of the sheep. Why? Because you have your spiritual head up your own spiritual rear end, and you think that this life is about you, and it's super not. It's super not. And so on the breakfast table is this offering and this invitation. This invitation to pull your head out of your spiritual rear and see the sheep that you need to love in your life and take care of their needs and be green grass and show them where to find nourishment and water to sit with them in their dark valleys. This invitation to purpose and kingdom work sits at the breakfast table tonight. And the other thing is this offering of rest in his love that is not affected by your failures. So here's the question I want to end with. Ready? What are you doing after breakfast? What happens after breakfast? Some of you are going to get up from the table and you're going to ignore that offering of rest in his love, and you're going to keep thinking that God's mad at you. Some of you may ignore the invitation because you just think you're too big of a deal, because you're too invested in your sport or your academics or whatever. But here's the crazy thing. What you'll do after breakfast, you get to answer that question right now. Will you go back to your old life? Or will you take up his offering of rest in his love? Will you take up his invitation to feed his sheep? Your answer starts now. Father, I come to you now, and I want to pray for all the Tibbits in the room and all the students in the room.